I used to be someone important. Or at least that's what they told me. The words left my mouth before I even knew I was saying them. They hung there, weightless and invisible in the morning air, as if they belonged to a different life. Maybe they did. I stood on the edge of the field, my boots sinking into dew-soaked grass, watching a dapple-gray horse graze quietly in the distance. The fog was still lifting off the hills like a soft curtain, and the world around me was silent, except for the rustle of leaves and the steady sound of him chewing. He didn't know me, and for the first time in years, that felt like a relief. My name is Claire Montgomery, 32, former creative director at a brand agency in London, and recently, very recently, utterly unraveled. 2 weeks ago, I slammed a resignation letter onto a glass desk, walked out of a skyscraper, and drove until the city lights disappeared in my rearview mirror. No dramatic speech, no suitcase full of dreams. Just a full tank of gas and a heart, too heavy to carry any further. I ended up here, at a friend of a friend's horse farm in North Yorkshire. A place that promised no schedule, no obligations, no voices demanding deliverables or smiles, just time, nature, space, and River. That was his name, River. He wasn't mine, not officially, but no one else was around to claim him. The owner, Ellie, had gone abroad for a family emergency and handed me the keys to the small guest cabin with a casual, "Take what you need." I think she meant food, water, blankets, but what I really needed was this horse. I just didn't know it yet. I first saw him the night I arrived. A flash of white and gray under moonlight, moving quietly at the far end of the pasture. I didn't try to approach him then. Something about his stillness felt sacred, untouchable. He stood like a sculpture, majestic, but not inviting. I understood that. I'd built entire walls around myself, too. The next morning, I walked down to the field after a sleepless night, armed with nothing but a thermos of bitter coffee and my own emotional hangover. I was still wearing the same clothes from the drive. Still hadn't unpacked, still hadn't cried. River didn't run when I reached the fence. He just lifted his head slowly, ears forward, eyes steady. That gaze went right through me. Not in a threatening way, just deep enough to remind me I was real, that I was here, that I hadn't disappeared entirely. I raised a hand. "Hi," I said. My voice cracked like an old radio. "You probably don't care, but I used to lead meetings with 30 people hanging on every word. And now I can't sleep, or eat, or tell if I'm doing the right thing." River blinked, then lowered his head back to the grass. It felt like the most honest conversation I'd had in years. I didn't try to touch him that first day. I just sat by the fence and watched, and I kept coming back. Day after day, I found myself pulled to the same spot. I'd bring coffee, or a book I never opened, or my journal, its pages still blank. Sometimes I spoke. Sometimes I just sat. Sometimes I cried. But not in the big dramatic way I used to imagine I would. No sobs. Just tears that slipped out quietly, without asking permission. River never flinched. Once he walked closer. Not all the way. Just enough that I could hear his breathing. It was deep, rhythmic. He exhaled like he'd known everything I was afraid to say. I didn't reach for him. I didn't want to break whatever was happening between us. It wasn't love. Not like a movie. And it wasn't healing. Not yet. It was just stillness. The kind I hadn't felt in years. By the 5th day, I was starting to sleep. Not great. Not through the night, but enough. Enough to dream again. I dreamed of empty offices, of broken clocks, of elevators that never reached the top floor. But in the distance, there was always a horse. Always River. That morning, I walked out to the field before sunrise, wrapped in an old sweater, with my hands stuffed in my pockets like a guilty teenager sneaking out. River was already waiting. I swear he knew I was coming. I opened the wooden gate for the first time and stepped inside. He looked up. His ears twitched, but he didn't move away. The ground was soft underfoot, and the world smelled like wet grass and coming rain. My breath came in little clouds. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from that strange sense that something mattered again. Something small, but real. I approached him slowly, one step at a time. His body was massive up close, but it didn't scare me. It grounded me. His flank rose and fell with every breath, his eyes calm, unblinking. When I stopped a meter away, I whispered, "I don't know how to do this. With you. With myself." He blinked, took a step forward, closed the gap between us. His nose brushed my sweater. I didn't move, not right away. Then I reached out, trembling, hesitant, and let my fingers graze his cheek. Warm, coarse, alive. The first thing I'd truly touched in months. I stayed in the field for hours that day. I didn't ride. I didn't even bring a halter. We just stood there, two beings who had nothing left to prove. River grazed, sometimes lifting his head to check on me. I walked in wide loops, barefoot now, letting the cool earth remind me that I had a body, not just a brain on overdrive. I watched the clouds. I listened to the wind. I counted how many birds passed overhead, and for the first time, I didn't think about deadlines, or rent, or how many likes my last post got. I just was. That night, I wrote in my journal. One sentence. Today I met someone who didn't need me to be anything. I don't know what I expected when I came here. Maybe some kind of breakdown. Or maybe a long nap that lasted a month. Instead, I met a creature who showed me how to breathe again without ever saying a word. He didn't care what I'd achieved. He didn't ask why I left. He didn't measure my worth in productivity or posture or performance. He just stood there, unmoving, unjudging, unafraid. And somehow, in his silence, I found my own. He waited, without asking anything. Some days pass without time. They blur, slow and quiet, like fog drifting through trees, present, but without urgency. That's what the next few days with River felt like. No schedule, no performance. Just a growing rhythm between two creatures who had forgotten how to ask for connection. I woke up on Thursday to birdsong outside the window. Not the dramatic movie kind, just a subtle, broken chorus of wings and whistles that made the sky feel alive again. I sat up in bed, curled my knees to my chest, and listened. For a moment, I thought about grabbing my phone. Then I remembered. I'd turned it off 4 days ago. No notifications, no distractions, just silence. And for once, it didn't feel empty. I made tea instead of coffee, poured it into a chipped mug I'd found in the cupboard and walked barefoot through the cabin, letting the cool wooden floors remind me I was still human, still here. When I reached the back door and opened it, the field came into view, and so did River. He was already near the gate, waiting, not pacing, not pawing, just standing there like a statue carved from wind and patience. His mane flicked lazily in the breeze, his eyes steady on mine. As if he knew I needed to see him this morning before I knew it myself, I laughed softly, the sound surprising me. "You're early." River flicked his ears but didn't move. I took it as permission. I pulled on my jacket, slipped into boots, and stepped outside into the dewy grass. The fog was lifting, and light poured over the field like gold unraveling across velvet. There was no one else around. No farmers, no hikers, no mailmen, just us, As I approached the gate, River lowered his head slightly. I reached up and rested my palm against his cheek, where his gray coat shifted into speckles of white like a riverbed under shallow water. His skin was warm. "I didn't sleep much," I whispered. Again. River didn't flinch. His breath steamed gently between us. "I keep waking up with this pressure in my chest," I confessed. "Like I forgot something important, but I don't know what. Like I'm missing something. Or maybe I'm what's missing." River blinked slowly. Then, in the quietest movement I'd ever seen, he shifted forward, just enough to press his forehead lightly into mine. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't magic. But I swear, something in me cracked open. That day, I didn't sit by the fence. I stepped into the field, and River let me walk beside him. I had no halter, no reins, only space and time. He grazed, and I wandered, keeping close. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. There was something sacred about his stillness. It wasn't passive. It was deliberate. As if by doing nothing he was doing everything I needed. He never asked for my attention, never demanded I perform. He just existed. And somehow, that gave me permission to exist too. At one point, I sat down on a patch of dry grass, legs crossed, elbows resting on my knees. River stood beside me. His shadow stretched long across the earth. I could hear his breath, the soft thud of his hooves when he shifted, the faint swish of his tail. I let the silence wrap around me like a weighted blanket. Not suffocating, grounding. And then I started to speak. Not loudly, not confidently. Just words, spilled like water through cracked hands. "I used to live on deadlines," I murmured. My calendar was so full, I scheduled my own crying sessions between conference calls. I thought if I could control everything, I'd feel safe. But the more I achieved, the emptier I felt. River chewed softly, head lowered. "I remember crying in a bathroom stall after winning an award," I said, because no one saw how dead I felt inside. I was smiling in heels while something inside me was quietly dying. The tears came, not all at once, not messy, just a slow release, as if my body finally believed it was allowed. River didn't walk away. He didn't even glance. He waited, without asking anything. By evening, the wind had picked up. Clouds rolled in from the west, painting the sky in charcoal and rose. I stayed out longer than I should have, but I didn't want to go back inside. The cabin felt too small now, too quiet in the wrong way. River walked with me to the far side of the field. There was an old tree there, oak, I think, wide and weathered. I leaned against its trunk and closed my eyes. River stood a few feet away, grazing again. And I whispered, "Do you ever miss who you used to be?" The question wasn't for him. It was for the girl I used to know, the one who wrote poems in the margins of school books, who danced barefoot, in the rain, who believed silence could be beautiful instead of terrifying. River turned his head slowly. His eyes met mine. I didn't get an answer. I didn't need one. That night, something shifted. I fell asleep earlier than usual, curled beneath a heavy blanket, listening to the wind rattle the windows. My dreams weren't dark. They were soft, blurred at the edges. I dreamed I was riding, not through a city street, not on a polished track, but through an open field at dawn, the air alive with mist and possibility. And River was there, running beside me, not carrying me, running with me, equal, free. The next morning, I woke up to light breaking through the curtains and the strange sound of my own laughter. I'd been dreaming again. Not about deadlines, not about escape, but about joy. Real, full body joy. I wrapped myself in a sweater and went outside, still barefoot. The grass was damp, but it didn't bother me. The world smelled like soil and sky, and somewhere, just beyond the trees, I could hear River's familiar huff of breath. I found him near the stream at the edge of the property, his reflection rippling on the water's surface. He looked up as I approached, his ears pricking, his body relaxed. I sat beside him on the slope, hugging my knees. "Can I tell you a secret?" I asked. River flicked his tail. "I don't miss my job." The words hit me harder than I expected. Saying them out loud felt like betraying everything I'd built for a decade, but it was the truth. I didn't miss the meetings, the pitches, the awards. What I missed was myself. "I used to think rest was weakness," I said. "That if I slowed down, I'd lose everything. But now I think maybe slowing down is the only way to remember what matters." River leaned toward me. I touched his muzzle gently. I didn't need applause. I didn't need likes. I didn't need anyone to witness what I was learning in this field, on this hillside, beside this horse. And that was the most powerful part. We were rebuilding something invisible, while no one was watching. We moved without words. The rain came, without warning. One moment the sky was merely moody, brushed with streaks of silver, and the next, it cracked open like a secret being spilled. I barely had time to grab my jacket before the wind started hurling droplets sideways across the field. "River!" I shouted, squinting through the sudden downpour. I saw him, gray against gray, standing in the middle of the open pasture, unmoved by the storm. He didn't flinch, didn't run. He stood calmly, as if the sky falling around him was just another ordinary day. But I couldn't leave him out there. Not now. Not after everything. Without thinking, I ran through the mud, boots slipping, heart pounding. Rain soaked my jeans in seconds, plastered my hair to my face, turned the world into a blurry watercolor of cold and wind and movement. I reached the gate, flung it open, and called again. "Come on, let's go." River raised his head slowly, and for a split second I thought he wouldn't come. But then, he moved. Deliberate, steady, powerful. He walked toward me, not rushed, not scared, like he knew I was there for him, like he trusted that I meant it. By the time he reached the fence, I was shivering. I grabbed the lead rope I'd tucked into my coat pocket and clipped it to his halter with numb fingers. "Let's get dry," I whispered. He followed me, through the mud, through the wind, through the storm, and we didn't speak a single word. The barn was dim and echoey, the kind of silence that lets you hear every creak of the beams and every drop of rain pounding on the roof. I led River inside and closed the door behind us. Water dripped from my sleeves, pooled around my boots. I was soaked to the skin. So was he. "Okay," I murmured, brushing hair out of my face. "Let's get you dry." There was an old wool blanket hanging on the wall and a stack of clean towels on the shelf. I grabbed one, unfolded it, and walked to his side. River didn't flinch as I pressed the towel gently to his neck, slowly soaking up the water. I moved carefully, as if every stroke was part of some silent ritual. Wipe, breathe, step, repeat. His muscles rippled beneath his skin, but he didn't shy away. He turned his head slightly, watching me with one soft, curious eye. I dried his shoulders, his back, his legs. I whispered small things while I worked. Nonsense words, like you'd say to a baby or a broken thing you didn't want to scare. "You're good," I said. "You're safe. I've got you." I wasn't sure if I was saying it to him or to myself. The barn smelled like hay, damp wood, and rain. We stood in the center of it, surrounded by the low hum of stormy silence. Once I finished drying him, I rested a hand on his shoulder and exhaled. My breath fogged in the cold air. My heart was strangely calm. River shifted slightly and took a step toward me, and then he did something I didn't expect. He rested his head against my chest, just gently. Just for a moment. But it undid me. My hands hovered in the air before I let them settle lightly around his neck. I could feel his heartbeat. Slow, steady, real. No one told him to do that. No one trained him to comfort a woman unraveling in the middle of a storm. He just knew. We stood like that for a long time, not moving, not thinking, just being. The wind outside rattled the barn door, but inside, it was still. The kind of still that settles into your bones. I leaned my forehead against his neck, breathing in the scent of him, earthy, warm, alive. And something inside me shifted. Like a stone that had been wedged deep into my chest had finally rolled free. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I didn't wipe them away. I used to think being strong meant pretending I was fine, I whispered. That showing up with a tight smile was bravery. But this feels stronger than any meeting I've ever led. River didn't move. He just stood with me, a mountain in the middle of a storm. Eventually I pulled back, blinking away the wetness in my eyes. You're a terrible therapist, you know. River gave the faintest snort. I smiled. You don't say much. Another snort. But maybe that's what I needed all along. I found an old curry comb in the supply box and started brushing him. The mud had dried in spots on his legs, and flecks of hay clung to his mane. He stood patiently, shifting only when I moved behind him. I worked in slow, even strokes, feeling tension melt from my shoulders with every pass. I realized then that we didn't need language. We didn't need stories or confessions or explanations. We were writing something new, through touch, through presence, through breath. We moved without words, and that somehow said more than anything else could. When the rain eased, I opened the barn doors again. The world outside was soft and clean, washed of dust and noise. Sunlight slipped through broken clouds like a blessing. The air smelled like rain and wildflowers. River stepped out first, ears forward, eyes scanning the horizon. I followed, walking beside him. We wandered to the edge of the pasture. No halter now, no rope. Just quiet companionship. A few birds called from the trees. The grass squished underfoot. Somewhere, a branch cracked in the woods. But none of it mattered. What mattered was the space between us, full of unspoken truth. I sat down on the damp ground. River stood beside me, tail flicking gently. I think I'm afraid of going back, I said quietly. Back to the noise, back to the pressure, back to who I used to be. He didn't react. But maybe I don't have to go back, I continued. Maybe I can go forward, different. River bent his head and nudged my shoulder gently. I looked up, surprised, and laughed. It was the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep, the kind that shakes loose the dust inside you. You agree? I said. He blinked slowly. The breeze ruffled his mane. I reached up and pressed my palm to his chest. I could feel the slow, steady beat of his heart beneath my hand. And for the first time in a long, long time, I matched my breath to something, outside of myself. We stayed out there until the sun dipped low. I didn't check the time. I didn't care. When I finally stood, River turned with me. I didn't lead. He followed. Or maybe I followed him. It didn't matter anymore. We were walking the same direction, together. No words, no force, no audience. Just this, whatever this was. The fence, the field, the leap. There's a moment, right before you do something reckless, when time feels thick. Like the world is holding its breath to see if you'll really go through with it. That moment found me standing in the middle of the field, fingers curled around the worn leather of River's bridle, heart pounding in my ears. I probably shouldn't, I murmured. River turned his head slightly, his eyes calm as ever. But if I don't, I'll never know. The morning had started like any other. I woke up to pale light brushing across the ceiling of the cabin, the kind that makes the world feel clean and untouched. I poured tea, skipped breakfast, and walked barefoot to the field, craving the steadiness River always seemed to bring. But something was different that day. I could feel it before I saw it. The air buzzed, just under the surface, with a restless energy. Not threatening, not loud, just waiting. River stood at the far edge of the pasture, near the fence that backed onto the open moor, a place I hadn't dared go. Not yet. He lifted his head when he saw me and, without hesitation, walked the length of the field to meet me. No halter, no lead, just two creatures meeting at the edge of something unspoken. I rubbed his forehead and let out a slow breath. Want to try something crazy? I hadn't ridden in years. Not since my teenage summers in Devon, when I'd gallop through wildflower meadows with scraped knees and sunburned shoulders, convinced I was invincible. That girl had disappeared somewhere between deadlines and heartbreak. But this morning, the memory of her stirred like smoke in my lungs. River watched as I retrieved the old bareback pad from the barn wall, brushing off dust and cobwebs. I hesitated, twice, before fastening it around his middle. He stood still, unbothered, as I adjusted the cinch. No saddle, I whispered. No plan. Just trust. Was I talking to him? Or myself? Probably both. I led him to the gate that opened toward the moor. The latch creaked in protest. My palms were damp. My stomach twisted in a nervous knot I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, exactly. More like standing on a cliff edge and daring yourself to jump. River stepped forward without resistance. Beyond the gate, the world changed. The field was open, wide and untamed, scattered with gorse bushes and framed by rolling hills. A narrow path cut through the grass, barely visible, like a forgotten road waiting to be rediscovered. I looked at River. Do you remember how to fly? He didn't answer, but his ears perked, and his body shifted, light, alive, alert. I placed one hand on his withers, steadied myself, and swung a leg over. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't elegant. But it was mine. Sitting on his back felt like waking up from a dream I didn't know I was having. His warmth pulsed beneath me, his breath deep and even. I wrapped my fingers into his mane and pressed my heels lightly against his sides. Walk, I whispered. And he did. The first few steps were slow, measured. My balance wobbled. My thighs ached. But as we moved, I remembered. Not how to ride, but how to trust. The wind caught my hair, the sun slipped through the clouds, and the silence around us filled with something electric. River's ears flicked forward, then back to me. He was listening, waiting. Okay, I said. Let's go. I gave the slightest cue, and River broke into a trot. My heart leapt with him, the world blurred, green and gold and wind and breath. Every step was a heartbeat. Every breath was a question. Could I still do this? Could I still let go? We reached the crest of a hill, and River hesitated, nostrils flaring. Below us, the moor opened wide like a secret too big to keep, And that's when I saw it. The fence. It wasn't high, maybe 3 feet. Old wooden rails, half swallowed by bramble. A relic from when someone used to care where horses ran. Beyond it, the land dropped into a rolling meadow, painted in wildflowers and golden. Light freedom, but only if we leaped. Everything in me screamed no, too risky, too unplanned, too much. But then I felt River's body beneath me, solid, grounded, and ready. He wanted to go, and I wanted to let him. My fingers tightened in his mane. My breath caught. "All right," I whispered. "Let's fly." He surged, forward. The wind roared in my ears. The world narrowed to a single line. The fence rushed toward us. My heart slammed against my ribs. And then, we were airborne, weightless, timeless, free. For one breathtaking second, I was that girl again. The one who believed in magic and second chances. The one who didn't need an audience to feel alive. We landed softly. No stumble. No hesitation. Just momentum. Motion. Music made of hooves and breath and wind. River kept going, powerful and sure. We galloped through the open meadow, laughter bursting from my chest like a dam breaking. I didn't care who heard. There was no one. Only us. Only this. When we slowed, both of us breathless, I slid off and collapsed onto the grass, heart hammering, legs trembling. River stood above me, his flanks heaving, his eyes bright. I reached up and touched his muzzle. That was insane. He exhaled sharply, almost like a laugh. I can't believe we did it. He lowered his head and nuzzled my shoulder. I was terrified, I admitted. Another nudge. But it was worth it. I lay back, staring at the sky, clouds drifting like ghosts. I felt everything and nothing all at once. Exhilarated, exhausted, exposed, but not empty, not anymore. We stayed there for hours. River grazed nearby, and I let the grass tickle my arms. My heart eventually slowed. My thoughts didn't race. My chest no longer felt like it was being held shut by invisible hands. I was here, fully. Finally. When the sky began to darken, we walked back together, side by side. The fence, once a barrier, looked different now. It didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a memory, a reminder of the leap I was brave enough to take. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We had moved together without words. Back at the barn, I brushed River in silence. My fingers moved slowly, methodically, like a prayer. He leaned into the strokes, eyes soft, completely relaxed. "You didn't let me fall," I said. And somehow, I knew he never would. That night, as I lay in bed, I didn't think about work, or failure, or the version of me I'd spent years building just to watch it all collapse. I thought about flight, about freedom, about trust, and about the horse who helped me remember that sometimes the scariest leaps lead to the most beautiful landings, especially when no one is watching. We did this while no one was watching. The field looked different that morning, not physically. It was still the same stretch of golden grass and lazy trees, the same worn path cut through by hooves, and time, but it felt different. Like something had shifted under the skin of the world. Or maybe it was me. I stood at the edge of the gate, boots resting in the damp earth, fingers trailing along the top rail. The early sun bathed the pasture in a glow that felt almost unreal. Everything was still, not empty, not silent, just paused. Behind me, the cabin door sat half open. My duffel bag was packed, slouched against the wall like a quiet reminder. You said you wouldn't stay forever. I hadn't, but forever had started to feel short. River was already near the stream, head lowered, tail flicking, calm as always. It had been 10 days since I arrived. 10 days that cracked me open and stitched me back together with no thread, no force, just breath, time, and trust. And him. I crossed the field barefoot, feeling the grass give beneath my toes. When River heard me approach, he lifted his head and turned slowly. His eyes met mine, and everything I'd been holding in my chest rose again. I hadn't told him yet. Not that he'd understand words, but horses. They understand energy. They feel the tremble behind a still hand. They read the hesitation in footsteps. And today, I was full of both. I walked to him and rested my forehead against his cheek. "I got a call last night," I whispered. River's breath touched my shoulder. "They want me to consult, freelance, from home. Just a few projects, nothing permanent, but it means going back, at least part way." He didn't move. They said I could start next week. Still, no reaction. And then, softly, he leaned his weight against me. Just slightly. Just enough to remind me that presence isn't about words. It's about staying. Even when you don't have to. Even when it hurts. I pulled back and met his gaze. "I don't know if I'm ready," I said. "To go. To stay. To become someone else again." River turned his head toward the trees. And that's when I had the thought. A wild, unfiltered, irrational thought. One more ride. Not just a stroll, not a memory, a moment. One final thing we would do while no one was watching. I ran back to the barn. No halter, no tack. Just adrenaline and instinct. River watched as I approached again. And this time, I didn't ask permission. I mounted him bareback in the field, muscles burning slightly from the strain. He stood still as stone. Not because he didn't care. Because he trusted. I gave him the lightest cue, and he moved. We galloped through the pasture like it belonged to us. Wind roared in my ears. My body swayed with his motion, not controlling, just following, just being. I didn't think. I didn't plan. We moved as one. No audience, no applause. Just grass underfoot and sky overhead and this wild, wordless freedom. I leaned forward and whispered, "Let's go further." He understood. We raced past the fence, past the meadow, past the old tree where I'd once confessed my emptiness. The world opened wider than I'd ever seen it. Every part of me was alive. Muscles, breath, blood. And then, he stopped. Sudden. Still. Focused. His ears flicked forward. His breath hitched, and that's when I heard it too. Footsteps. Not hooves. Boots. I slid off his back, heart thudding. Someone was coming through the trees. I stepped forward instinctively, putting my hand on River's neck. A man emerged. Late 50s, broad shoulders, muddy coat. Not threatening, but not friendly either. "Claire Montgomery?" he asked, eyes scanning me, then River. I hesitated. "Yes, I'm James," he said, tapping his jacket where a badge hung loose. "I manage land conservation for the area. I had a report someone was riding through the protected moorland this week." My stomach dropped. I didn't know," I stammered. "I didn't see any signs." "There aren't any," he said. "We usually rely on locals to spread the word. It's nesting season. Ground birds. Easily disturbed." "I'm so sorry," I said quickly. "We didn't mean any harm." He eyed River. "Beautiful horse. Not from around here, is he?" "No," I said. "He belongs to Ellie. I'm just looking after him." James nodded slowly. His eyes softened. I won't report anything. Just be careful. This land's fragile, like a lot of things. I exhaled. Thank you. He turned to go, then paused. You rode him without a saddle? Yes. A slight smile cracked his face. Brave. He disappeared into the woods. The adrenaline lingered in my blood. River nuzzled my arm. I rubbed his cheek, heart still racing. You scared me, I whispered. Stopping like that. But deep down, I knew he was protecting something. Not just birds. Me. Us. I led him back slowly, tracing the edges of the pasture like a memory. Every corner held echoes of the last 10 days. Quiet truths whispered into wind, laughter spilled without judgment, and healing done without ceremony. Back at the barn, I brushed him down in silence. My hands moved automatically. My throat ached. I think I have to go, I said softly. River blinked, but not back to who I was. I touched his forehead. I'll take you with me. Not literally. I wish I could. But what we did here, it stays. He exhaled. I'm going to remember this. Every ride, every still moment, every time I wanted to run and you stayed. Later, that evening, as the sky burned orange and pink, I walked back into the field one last time. I didn't bring tack. I didn't bring words. I just sat in the grass. River came to me, and we did what we'd always done best. We existed, together, in silence, while no one was watching. 2 months later, the city never really stops humming. Cars, voices, construction, all layered into one constant buzz. But now, I don't let it drown me. I let it pass. I work part-time now. I say no to meetings. I unplug when I need to. People raise eyebrows, but I don't explain myself. Not anymore. Every morning I take a walk before emails. I stop by the park. I watch the trees. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can feel River again. His breath, his stillness, his weight pressed gently against my chest. He taught me how to stand still. He taught me how to leap. He taught me how to be seen. By myself. What we did wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral. It wasn't for anyone else, but it mattered, because we did this while no one was watching.